To Indonesia now, where the Islamic cleric Abu Bakr Bashir has been arrested, along with several other suspects believed to be involved in a new terrorist cell. Now, it's emerged the group was planning to attack the Australian embassy in Jakarta.
Amy Zegart is a national security expert from UCLA and was on the National Security Council during the Clinton administration in the 1990s. She's in Australia as a visitor of the United States Study Centre of the University of Sydney, and she joins us now. Amy Zegart, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me this morning.
What do the events in Indonesia overnight say about the continued threat posed by these regional-based terrorist organisations?
Well, I think it's a complicated threat now, much more complicated than we faced on 9/11. What we now have is a three-tiered threat. We have a threat posed from Al-Qaida Central. We have a threat, as the arrest yesterday indicates, from these regional organizations, including Al-Qaida in the Arabian Peninsula. Some experts in America believe it's fair to say that there may be a regional organization in the United States. And the third tier of threat we face is homegrown radicalization in the United States and abroad.
Are there linkages between these three tiers, as you say?
There are linkages. It's a very fluid, dynamic kind of a threat. And sometimes it's hard to say how much support different terrorists are getting from Al-Qaida Central, Al-Qaida organizations. But in the past year, we've seen a dramatic uptick in the number of terrorist plots targeting the U.S. homeland. And they come in all three varieties: Al-Qaida Central, Al-Qaida affiliates. The Christmas Day bomber, Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib, was trained by Al-Qaida in the Arabian Peninsula, and homegrown threats, the Fort Hood killings in the United States, and most recently the Times Square bombing attempt was by an American citizen. So we see all three now in the profile of attacks, plots against the United States.
How concerned is the US intelligence community about countries like Indonesia serving as training camps and the potential launching pad for attacks on terrorist targets like countries like Afghanistan were prior to 2001?
Well, I think it's pretty clear, and American intelligence officials have known for a long time, that Al-Qaida is a global terrorist organization. And while we're focused on the war in Afghanistan, Al-Qaida operates in 60-plus countries around the world, including inside the United States. So there's always concern about Al-Qaida and terrorist syndicate activities, not just in Afghanistan where we're focused today, but around the world.
You're a long-time critic of the lack of coordination in the US in terms of the intelligence community working together to combat terrorist threats. How big a gap is that creating in terms of exposing America, indeed other countries, to terrorist attacks?
Well, I think there's good news and bad news in terms of looking at intelligence reform in the past 9 years. On the one hand, we have seen some dramatic improvements. The creation in America, the National Counterterrorism Center, is supposed to really coordinate that terrorism threat reporting coming in from around the world. On the other hand, we have now 16 different federal intelligence agencies in the United States. We had 12 before 9/11. And we have a proliferation of state and regional threat reporting fusion centers and the like. And so the coordination challenge in some ways is even more difficult today than it was 9 years ago.
Do you fear sometimes it'll take another catastrophic attack like 9/11 to bring about serious change, serious reform to the intelligence fabric in America?
I really worry that even that may not be enough. What we see is that intelligence reform is really an unnatural act for the bureaucracy, that the tendency has always been to have separate organizations with specialized intelligence capabilities. And the longer we get from 9/11, the more we see reform stalling in some places and even sliding backwards in others. The two concerns that I really have are, number one, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Intelligence Czar, that was created in 2005. And we see a real weakness in that office. We just now in the United States confirmed our fourth Director of National Intelligence in the past 5 years. When you have turnover that high, it's a real signal of organizational crisis. The second real concern I have is our domestic intelligence capabilities, most notably in the FBI. I talk a lot with analysts and agents in the FBI, and what I'm hearing from them these days is that reforms are sliding backward, that in many ways the roles of analysts are actually worse now than they were several months or even a year or two ago. Analysts are not being treated as equal partners in the intelligence effort, and unless they are, the FBI will not succeed.
As part of your visit to Australia, you've been holding consultations with officials from the Office of National Assessments, Australia's peak intelligence agency. What's your early assessment on how Australia's intelligence network is structured?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not actually going to the Office of National Assessments until Thursday. I'm quite looking forward to it, but I can't speak to that particularly right now. What I can say is I know that Australia and the United States have a history of cooperation in intelligence and national security affairs, and I look forward greatly to learning more about what the Australian government is doing and sharing what I know of to be best practices both on the American side and the Australian side so we can improve analytic practices across the board.
Do events like the wholesale leaking of documents care of WikiLeaks a couple of weeks ago, should that give pause for thought to countries like Australia in terms of sharing intelligence with the US?
It's a great question. You know, the WikiLeaks episode has revealed a number of critical issues. There's always this tension between security on the one hand and openness on the other. And one of the reasons why these documents pose some real concern in terms of protecting sources and methods is because they were able to be posted on the internet so readily. And the reason they were able to be posted so readily is because the intelligence community has actually made great progress in sharing information out to the battlefield. Whenever you share more information, you run the risk of revealing too much information that can compromise your sources and methods. So it's a very delicate balance between openness and transparency, which we have to have in a democracy, and protecting our security, particularly in a war situation.
Amy Zegart, thanks for your insights this morning.
Thanks so much.